Now joins me Dr. Carlos Ruano. He is an international development worker, and he has also previously worked for the UN, and currently he is an analyst for the government of Canada. Welcome, Carlos.
Thank you very much, Yannick. Happy to be here.
Can you please a little bit further elaborate on the situation in Afghanistan pertaining to the work of international development worker and its implications?
Yes, I was posted there all the way to the start of the pandemic in March of last year. So I was able to see firsthand pretty much everything right up to the point where most international workers had to leave. Now, what happened since that time is that a number of workers have come back. As you know, there was a transition now. It's no longer the previous Afghan government. It is now the new government that is headed by the Taliban. And they took over a few months ago. But as we all know from previous experiences in other countries under conflict, it is one thing to have an opposition force or being an insurgent group to fight a long, drawn-out war like the Taliban did, but it's quite another to be in government. And so that transition they have to make now from being not having really any say in the matters of state to now being in complete control of the entire government. This has caused a lot of difficulties because after 20 years, they really do not know much about the public administration. And so basic services, even the airport operation had to be restored with the help of international workers. So given these conditions, there's a number of organizations that have come back. Most of the UN agencies went back. Definitely the larger ones like World Food Program, where I was working, UNICEF, UNESCO, they have gone back. The one big absence, of course, is the World Bank, because the World Bank was froze all assistance until there is some issues resolved in terms of recognition of the Afghan government, because a lot of countries have not yet recognized the current authorities as the government of Afghanistan. So in the meantime, there's no development assistance coming from the World Bank, and by far, they were the largest contributors. So they are a big absence there. Other countries might fill in the void, perhaps China, perhaps India, perhaps neighboring Iran, who has a significant influence for historical and socio-cultural reasons. But for now, the assistance is really a matter of just day-to-day, week-to-week, and month-to-month for really basic services. There is not a really long-term programming in terms of the kind of development assistance that was being done prior to the pandemic.
And what does it mean concretely for development workers now in the country? Isn't there the trust that is basically eroding because there is obviously, it takes time to build trust, and the Taliban don't necessarily have the best name so far?
Yes, one of the interesting developments in that area is that the new authorities asked all current public employees to stay in place. So they were not fired, they were not let go. So a large number of public officials remain in the country. So they are carrying on with activities of the day-to-day governance. Again, this is a realization that they were really not expecting to be able to be back in power so quickly. I mean, the situation deteriorated in a matter of weeks. Basically, people were saying, all Western analysts were saying that it will be years before there was change. Within 3 weeks, half of the country was in Taliban hands. Within 6 weeks, the entire country was in their hands. So this came as a shock to them as well, not just to outsiders. So now they're in the process of, like you said, regaining trust. And one way of regaining trust is by leaving most of the public service in place. So that is a very positive step, because development workers are used to dealing with those kinds of relationships that have been developed over years and years. And so having the same people to speak with is a good step forward. On the other hand, as you probably heard, there's the issue of gender representation. The current government does not feel that women should be represented at higher levels of government. They are represented at the lower levels, but not at the higher or decision-making levels. And that is a big obstacle, if you like, to engage with international development partners, because most of them believe, and rightfully so, that there should be an inclusion in activities at the level of decision-making bodies. And that's not there at the moment. It remains to be seen if there's going to be a change in attitude. We're not really sure at this point, but it's definitely not the hardened positions that you would have seen in 2001, for instance. And it's definitely far from the kind of rigidity that we tend to associate, for instance, with the Pakistani Taliban, who are quite rigid in those positions and who are quite belligerent about it. So we'll have to see what the evolution of that is. Again, this is a period of confusion in the sense that the new government really isn't completed the transition yet. The old government is no more, but it's sort of scattered around, and many of the individuals who had key positions in the previous administration left. There was a number of reported instances where former officials were embezzling money, and they took large amounts of money with them as they fled the country. So that has caused serious deficiencies in all of things pertaining to public administration. So we're kind of, I think we're kind of optimistic that the reality of 2022 is quite different than 2001. And they will going to have to switch certain positions in regards to representation, because that's one of the key elements and one of the key demands of many international partners for overseas development assistance to really open up. And that will certainly produce a marked tone, a marked change in the tone between the countries that surround Afghanistan. We're talking China, we're talking Russia, we're talking Iran, India, Pakistan, from what the situation is now, which is basically almost complete isolation.
Now, more personal question. Would you personally go right now and work as an international development worker in Afghanistan? In other words, would you recommend someone who will get a posting in Afghanistan as an international development worker? Would you say, well, okay, you can go, you might be safe?
A place like Afghanistan, because it's been a war for the last 50 years, it's not necessarily a place where you, quote unquote, recommend people to go, because there's a very large and significant number of issues that need to be addressed. And Afghans themselves will tell you that after decades of constant warfare, that they themselves have a sort of a permanent status of PTSD at the societal level, and that has to be addressed as well. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's a place where I would say, yeah, sure, by all means go, but definitely it's not a place that, it's definitely no more dangerous than what it was when I was there before, and that was in the middle of a large-scale war. It's definitely not as problematic because now all the issues that we had when we were working, for instance, when I was there, you knew that at night, the opposition groups control the city. So there will be, at the daytime, there will be appearance of control in Kabul and the large cities, but at nighttime, it was the opposition, the Taliban, who controlled them. So there will be all-out fights every night. There will be constant fighting over territory and positions. There will be fatalities. There will be suicide bombs. There will be many threats that come with a large-scale conflict that are now basically being extinguished. And that kind of threat is now, because now they are in power, is now basically coming to an end. The big challenge that remains in Afghanistan is the opium cultivation. A lot of the drug warlords used opium sales as a way to buy weapons and influence and other stuff, and therefore now the government would turn its attention against those former warlords / drug lords and their source of income, which is opium. And that will be a quite a fight that they have in their hands. However, it would not be the kind of fight that I witnessed, which was basically a constant instability, constant landmines, constant improvised explosive devices, rocket propelled grenades, random attacks, constant harassment of government troops. That's basically eliminated. So in that sense, the immediate threat to life that we had, it's been reduced. To what extent, I don't know, because I'm not there. What I suspect from my colleagues on the ground that they tell me is that it is being significantly reduced. So from people that I talked to who are now back in Afghanistan, and some who never left, because quite frankly, when the pandemic started, there were some people who were based in Italy. Well, they were never going to go back to Italy because, frankly, the pandemic situation was worse in Italy than it was in Afghanistan. So they never left. So there's a few a number of small group of international workers who never left, and who are still there, and some who went back, and they all tend to agree that in that type of security threat, it has definitely been reduced. What it has not been reduced is the challenge of hunger, because the winter is now upon them. And so all the roads across the Himalayas are now basically shutting down for the long winter. So there is a food security issue. There is a health issue, because there's basic medicines and basic attention is not available. There is the ongoing pandemic, of course. And there is the issue of, like I said, lack of recognition, lack of legitimacy in the eyes of the international community. And all those areas need to be addressed by the new authorities, the new government, understanding that, again, the international community has serious concerns still, but like it or not, they are now the new government, and we have to deal with them.
Carlos, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you so much, Anik. Pleasure.
Dr. Carlos Ruano.